I've always been drawn to places people forget. Crumbling gas stations, old train depots, long dead mining roads. Something about the desert especially, how it hides the bones of civilization in plain sight, always made me feel more alive. So in the fall of 2021, I took a few days off and drove out to the desert near Kingman, Arizona. My plan was simple: hike, take photos, and maybe mark a few unmapped shafts for fun. I wasn't expecting anything dangerous. Creepy? Sure, but not dangerous. The weather was perfect. Mid-60s during the day, cool at night, not a cloud in the sky. I had a solid topo map, 2 GPS units, and my usual kit: snacks, water, first aid, satellite phone, and my GoPro mounted to my chest rig. I'd read about an abandoned copper operation west of town, barely marked on any maps. No major roads led to it, just a few ATV trails and dry washes. I parked where my SUV could still turn around and started hiking in. After about an hour, I found the first shaft. It was half covered by an old wooden grate, but still wide enough for someone stupid like me to want a better look. I circled it, found a solid patch of rock with old rebar anchors, and lowered myself down about 15 feet using my rope and harness. Not too deep. The floor was compacted dirt and scattered tools, busted picks, metal buckets, a decayed wooden sled. Pretty standard stuff for the time. But what caught my eye wasn't the relics. It was the footprints. They were fresh. Someone had been down there recently, and I mean recently, within a day or two, maybe less. The dust was too cleanly disturbed. No scuff from boots like mine, just a flat tread, narrower. Maybe a work shoe, maybe a woman's. I couldn't tell. The shaft split into 2 side tunnels. I stood there, staring into the one where the prints vanished. And for the first time on this trip, I felt a hesitation that wasn't just caution. It was something more instinctive. Like my body had decided it didn't want to go any farther before my mind could catch up. I started backing toward the rope, slowly. Nothing made a sound except a light trickle of loose pebbles from somewhere deeper in the mine. It was that faint noise that got under my skin, the kind that doesn't belong, like someone or something adjusting their position, knowing I was listening. I climbed out, didn't run, didn't panic, just got out of that hole and stood there at the rim, trying to make sense of what felt so wrong. It could have been another explorer, maybe someone who came through the night before. Sure, possible, but unlikely. I hadn't seen another car, another footprint, another anything for miles. Still, the mine had set something off in me. That unease didn't leave. I sat on a nearby boulder for 20 minutes, just scanning the surrounding brush and rocks, listening. Nothing moved. But it didn't feel empty. I figured that was enough adventure for the day. I marked the shaft on my map, took a few quick photos from the rim, and started heading back. That night, I camped in a small, dry canyon about a mile from the site. It was a beautiful spot. Smooth rocks, wind-carved ridges, and absolute silence. Too silent. I kept telling myself I was just spooked, that I let the mind get in my head, that the desert plays tricks when you're alone. I boiled some water, made a dehydrated meal, and tried to watch something dumb on my phone before bed. Just before I turned in, I reviewed my GoPro footage. Shots of my boots, dust, the shaft, and then something. Right at the point where I started backing away from the footprints, there was a strange distortion in the audio. Not wind, not static. Something deeper, like a breath. Low, in and out, but not mine. I rewound, listened again. It was definitely breathing. Slow, controlled. Then, just before the video cut off, my camera battery had been dying. I heard something else. A footstep. One. Just one. But it was close. I didn't sleep much. I couldn't relax. Every time the wind blew or something rustled outside, I was wide awake. At one point, around 3 a.m., I thought I heard something scraping outside, like grit dragging across canvas. I didn't unzip the tent. I just sat there, hand on my pocket knife, waiting. It never came back. The next morning, I packed up early. I hadn't heard anything more during the night, but I didn't want to stick around. I kept looking behind me as I hiked. Not obsessively, but enough that I realized I wasn't just being cautious anymore. I was worried. Maybe even scared. Not of some creature. Not even a person necessarily. It was the silence that scared me most, because it felt like something was choosing not to be heard. Halfway back to my SUV, I took a wrong turn in one of the washes. Ended up near another smaller shaft, one I hadn't seen the day before. There were no footprints around it, no signs of entry. But something made me pause. At the entrance, scratched faintly into the wood of the old support beams, were 4 vertical lines and a diagonal slash crossing them out, like someone had been counting days, or people. I made it back to my SUV and got out of there. A few days later, back home, I dumped all my footage to my computer. I watched the mine segment again in full screen. That breathing was still there. But now, with better headphones, I heard more. A metallic clink. Something like metal brushing rock, like a chain dragging. And right before the feed cuts, there's this shuffle, like something dragging one foot behind the other. But what got me the worst was the last 3 seconds. As I'm climbing out, the GoPro catches a faint sound behind me. It's hard to make out, buried under the gravel crunch of my boots, but it's there. A second pair of footsteps, pacing mine. I didn't find a mine. I found something else. And I think it wanted me to stay. We were just 2 dumb college kids trying to escape summer classes. Kevin and I had planned the trip for weeks. He found some random patch of BLM land way out in eastern Nevada. No service, no fences, just endless desert and sky. It sounded perfect, peaceful, uncomplicated, the kind of place where your thoughts could actually breathe. We left early on a Friday morning, drove 6 hours from Reno with a cooler full of beer, gas station snacks, and a trunk full of gear. Our campsite was pretty basic, just a couple of tents, a fire ring made from stacked rocks, and an old folding table Kevin brought from his garage. We set up before sundown, cracked open some drinks, and spent the evening watching the sky turn gold, then blue, then black and full of stars. It really was beautiful. There was no wind, no bugs, no noise. Just that low sound of the desert at night, the kind of silence that lets you hear how loud your thoughts are. We cooked hot dogs on the fire, made fun of each other, and talked about dumb things like what we'd do if we found buried treasure or stumbled on an old UFO crash. Kevin joked he'd sell it to the government for beer money. I told him I'd keep it and disappear. It was one of those nights you don't realize you'll remember forever until later. Until it's the last normal thing before everything breaks. Around midnight, we called it. Kevin said he was beat. I was too. So we doused the fire and each climbed into our tents. Mine was about 15 feet from his, maybe 20. Just enough distance to hear him if he talked, but not clearly. We left a flashlight between our tents on a stump in case one of us needed to get up in the night. Sometime later, an hour maybe, I woke up. At first, I thought it was a dream, that fuzzy feeling where your brain hasn't caught up yet. But I was awake. I knew it because I could hear something. Movement. Footsteps. They weren't loud, just light crunches in the sand like someone trying not to be heard. I sat up slowly and unzipped my tent an inch. Looked out. Nothing. Just the glowing outline of Kevin's tent and stars overhead. I whispered his name. No answer. Then I heard the whisper. But it wasn't from Kevin. It was low, muted, like someone crouching and talking right outside his tent. I couldn't make out words, just the tone. Soft, like coaxing, like someone talking to a scared dog. I froze. Just sat there, staring. Then the sound stopped. Total silence. I waited a full minute before lying back down, eyes wide open, listening to nothing. I must have drifted off. I don't remember. The next thing I do remember is Kevin screaming. I shot up, unzipped the tent fully, and the world outside was orange. His tent was on fire. The flames were high, snapping, and his silhouette was writhing inside. I ran barefoot, yelling his name. I didn't even think. I just grabbed a corner of the tent and yanked. The nylon tore, giving me a glimpse of Kevin, his leg tangled in a sleeping bag, trying to crawl out. I helped drag him free. His arms were red, his shirt half melted. He was coughing, screaming, trying to say something. I pulled him back, far from the fire, and dumped water from our cooler over him. It hissed when it hit his skin. His hands were shaking so badly I had to force his water bottle to his lips. We sat there in the dirt, trembling. The tent was toast. Nothing left but the poles and a twisted frame. I kept asking what happened. He kept saying the same thing. Someone was in the tent. At first I thought he was delirious. But the look in his eyes, that wild, searching look, it wasn't confusion. It was fear. He said he'd woken up to someone standing over him. Thought it was me. Then he saw the face. It wasn't you, he kept saying. It wasn't you. I tried to shine my flashlight around the area, but it only reached so far. I didn't see anyone. No tracks. No gear. No sign that anyone had been there, but I didn't feel alone. Not really. The hairs on the back of my neck were standing up, and every time I turned the light toward the bushes, I expected to see someone or something just outside the beam. We sat back to back until sunrise. Neither of us slept. Kevin whimpered off and on. I kept my hand on the camp hatchet, though I don't know what I thought I'd do with it. When the sun came up, we packed what we could. Kevin's arms were blistered and raw. I drove him to the nearest hospital, an hour and a half away. On the way there, he stared out the window and didn't say a word. Later that day, we gave a statement to the sheriff. They took photos, logged the burn site, said they'd send someone out to check it. But they didn't sound hopeful. Too remote. No cameras, no tire tracks, no shoe prints. When I mentioned the whispering, the deputy shrugged. Could have been wind, he said. I almost laughed. Wind doesn't coax. Wind doesn't whisper your name. Kevin was never the same. He dropped out of school that fall, moved in with his uncle in Montana. We kept in touch for a while, but he never wanted to talk about that night. Not once. I brought it up once on a call. He hung up. A year later, he blocked my number. I don't blame him. He remembers more than he said. We thought we were alone. I think we were being hunted. It was supposed to be a quiet trip. I'm a field biologist. Most of what I do involves cataloging animal behavior, running environmental impact assessments, and being alone for long stretches in places most people don't even think about. Spring 2021 had me working a site along a winding stretch of oil access roads near Marfa, West Texas. Nothing but dry brush, cracked earth, and endless miles of unforgiving space. Perfect for observing wildlife. Terrible for relaxing your nerves after sundown. This particular week, I was setting up camera traps and acoustic sensors to monitor small mammal activity in some of the more remote desert corridors. I'd been out there 3 days already, long, sunburned days and colder than expected nights. But that was the job. You get used to the silence, the lack of signal. You stop missing voices after a while. I made camp on the third night near a dry wash about half an hour from the nearest pump jack. I picked the spot because it was quiet and flat, tucked between two low ridgelines. No cell service, no traffic, not even the distant thump of a rig. Just me, the gear, and the wind. I pitched my tent before dark, made some instant ramen on the little propane stove, and sat on a rock scribbling notes while the sky turned from gold to black. Before I turned in, I spent a few minutes stargazing. The desert sky out there looks like something out of science fiction, layered with stars in every direction, more than I could count. It's moments like those that remind me why I do this job. You feel small, but also grounded, like you're a part of something ancient and permanent. That's when I noticed it. A faint light, barely more than a glimmer, bobbing slowly out past the scrub. It was far, maybe 400 yards out, and moving like someone walking with a flashlight. I figured it had to be another surveyor or maybe a landowner checking wells. Not common this far out, but not impossible. I stood up, waved my headlamp to let them know I was there. They didn't wave back. The light didn't even flinch, it just kept floating along its lazy arc, then slowly dimmed until it vanished. 10 minutes later, it reappeared. Closer this time. Same bobbing motion, like someone walking with rhythm. Still no reaction when I called out, "You good out there?" Silence. No engine, no dogs, no voices. Just that floating orb of light that should have made me feel safer, but didn't. After a few minutes of staring at it, the light disappeared again. I tried to laugh it off, told myself it was probably someone doing maintenance, maybe a pipeline worker out for a midnight check. Could have even been refraction or some rig throwing light through heat haze. I told myself that, zipped up the tent and tried to sleep. I couldn't. Then the light came back. This time it was closer, much closer, and it wasn't bobbing anymore. It just stayed still, pointed directly at the mesh screen of my tent. The brightness filled the interior like a spotlight. I didn't move, didn't blink. I lay on my side with my breath caught in my throat, clutching my multi-tool like it was actually going to help. I remember counting the seconds. I got to 300 before I lost track. The light never moved. It didn't flicker. It just stayed right where it was, dead center on the tent wall. At one point, I thought I heard footsteps, just one or two faint crunches in the dirt and brush. But when I strained to hear more, there was nothing. I was so still that my arms began to ache from tension. At one point, I debated yelling, just something, to break the silence, to test if it would react. But something in me said not to. Then the light went out. Not like a beam shifting away, just gone, like someone flipped a switch. Sleep wasn't even an option. When the sky finally started to turn gray, I sat up slowly and unzipped the tent. The desert was back to normal. Pale orange light spilling across the ridge. No flashlight, no footprints, no broken branches. I walked out a good distance in a circle. Nothing. Not even tire marks in the hardpan. Except one thing. About 30 feet away, in the exact direction the light had come from, I found a patch of dirt where the gravel had been disturbed, like something had knelt there. The shape wasn't clear, but it looked intentional. I didn't linger. But the weirdest part came later. About a week after I got back home, I received an envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single item, a smooth, gray rock. Nothing too strange, until I realized it was the same type of gravel used at that campsite, not from anywhere near where I lived. I don't know how anyone would have known where I was, or that I had even left the camp early. I hadn't posted about the trip. I hadn't told many people where I was going. But the thought that kept gnawing at me was this. My license plate had been visible the whole time. Maybe someone had jotted it down. Maybe they ran it. You'd be surprised what someone can learn from a plate number if they know where to look. And yet, here was this rock, identical in weight and texture to the ones I saw beside that disturbed patch of ground. No note, no explanation. I packed up and drove to the ranger station the next morning, told the guy at the desk everything. He listened, nodding, scribbling a few notes. When I finished, he tapped the pen twice and said, "We get those stories every now and then. Could be pranksters. Could be worse." I asked him what he meant by worse, and he just shrugged. People out there sometimes disappear. Folks come out here to do things they don't want to be seen doing. That was the end of it. No one followed up. I've been in the field dozens of times since then. I've heard coyotes scream like babies and seen mountain lions stalk the edges of camp. But that light, so steady, so quiet, still haunts me. Because whatever it wasn't lost. It wasn't asking for help. It knew exactly where I was, and it didn't want to talk. It started as one of my favorite kinds of trips. Solo, quiet, and wide open. I was somewhere along the Arizona Strip, a remote patch of land between the Grand Canyon and the Utah border. No cell service, no nearby towns, just dusty roads, endless scrubland, and red cliffs that looked like they'd been carved by time itself. I had my truck loaded up with supplies, 2 weeks off work, and a plan to camp in silence for a few days before moving north toward Zion. I was craving stillness, not excitement. Peace, not interaction. The first night went exactly the way I hoped it would. I found a small clearing with a half circle of rock formations shielding me from the wind. Set up my tent, made some soup on the camp stove, cracked a beer, and watched the stars come out. It was pure peace. The kind of quiet you don't realize you've been missing until you hear it again. The next morning, I noticed another vehicle parked a few hundred feet away. An older model truck, blue, beat up, looked like it had seen better decades. I was a little irritated, honestly. There was plenty of space out here, and I had picked that spot specifically because it was out of the way. Still, it's public land. I didn't own it. The man who stepped out was probably in his 60s. Wiry, sun-darkened skin. big white beard that looked like it belonged on a mountain man more than a weekend camper. He raised a hand and gave me a polite nod. I returned it, but didn't walk over. He didn't wave again. He didn't seem curious about me at all. Just nodded, then walked behind his truck to unload gear. He didn't set up a tent, just a tarp stretched between two stakes and a few plastic bins arranged neatly near a folding chair. No cooler, no firewood. But by midday, I noticed something strange. He was digging. Not a little fire pit, not a trench for runoff. A pit, large, square, about 6 feet long, maybe 3 feet wide, deep too. He was using a proper shovel, taking his time, not sweating it, just casually, methodically, working at it like he was building something important. I walked over eventually, curiosity won, and I had to see for myself. "You planning on burying treasure out here or what?" I joked. He looked up, smiled, one of those fake ones. "Just in case I meet someone worth burying," he said. And then he laughed. It wasn't a cackling laugh, it wasn't even loud. It was just enough to make my skin crawl. I forced a laugh back, gave him a half wave, and walked away. Every instinct in my body wanted me to pack up and leave right then, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe the guy had a twisted sense of humor. Maybe he was just messing with me. The rest of that day was off. I couldn't focus on reading or even enjoy cooking. I kept looking over to where he was camped, and sure enough, he was still working on that hole. He'd added a rough frame around it with wooden planks. That night, I lay in my tent listening to the wind howl and something else, metal on metal, like he was hammering something down. At one point, I unzipped my tent halfway and peeked out. His lantern was still on, glowing faint orange through the thin tarp. The silhouette of him standing next to the pit was clear. He wasn't digging anymore. He was just standing there, staring at it. The next morning, I debated packing up and leaving, but I talked myself out of it. I didn't want to seem paranoid. Maybe it was just a weird guy doing something weird. Harmless. Harmless people say strange things all the time. Doesn't make them dangerous. That evening, I kept to my side of the clearing, built a small fire, made some food, tried to pretend he wasn't there. But I kept hearing small things. Twigs snapping near my tent. Faint footsteps just outside the firelight. Once, I swore I saw his silhouette just standing on the ridge nearby, watching. When I turned my headlamp in that direction, it was gone. Just before I turned in, I saw that he had covered the pit, laid a blue tarp over it, secured with rocks. But the shape underneath wasn't flat. It bulged slightly, like something had been placed inside. I told myself it was just dirt, maybe a way to keep it from filling with sand overnight. That night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of movement. Definitely not an animal. Something slower, more controlled. Footsteps. I held my breath and listened. Someone was walking the perimeter of my tent. Not hurried, just circling. Then a pause. Then another circle. I didn't move. Just waited, eyes wide in the darkness. My multi-tool was in my boot by the flap, but I didn't dare reach for it. At one point, I thought I heard digging again. A single scrape, then nothing. After what felt like an hour, the sound stopped. Just stopped. No retreating footsteps, just gone. When morning finally broke, I climbed out of the tent, expecting to find the man standing there, but his camp was empty. Truck gone. No tarp, no pit, no sign he had ever been there. Except for one thing. A patch of dirt where the pit had been, smoothed over, but not clean, and something heavy had been dragged through the sand, leading to the brush. I followed the drag marks for maybe 10 feet before turning back. My stomach was twisting. I didn't want to see what was at the end. I didn't waste a second, just packed and bailed, no breakfast or anything. Got in my truck and drove until I saw a highway sign. I reported it, gave coordinates, told them everything I saw. The officer on the phone listened quietly, asked if I had pictures. I didn't. I wasn't exactly thinking straight. He thanked me, said they'd send someone to check it out. That image is stuck with me. The calmness, the smile, the way he chose that exact clearing despite having miles of open desert. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe he buried garbage. Maybe it was nothing. But I don't think so. He wasn't just preparing the pit. He was waiting to decide who to put in it. If wide open spaces and no cell signal sound peaceful, you haven't watched this channel enough. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and leave your survival tips in the comments. I read every single one. Some people go off the map for peace and quiet. Others go missing. Click now to watch 4 scary middle-of-nowhere horror stories. And maybe don't camp solo this year. Stay alert and stay safe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.